So I'm a lead data scientist at a company called Centriam. Um, it's what does data scientist or lead data scientist mean? It kind of depends on the company.
What
Everyone's
what
got a
does it
different
what
opinion.
does it mean in your regard? Like what do you do?
For my regard, it's a really broad scope because we're a very small company. We have 4 total full-time employees. So my role as lead data scientist is kind of multiple parts. Um, one of which is data engineering. Another of which is kind of your traditional data science. But then I also span business analysis, data analysis. I interact with customers most days, some days at least, and then I mentor kind of our junior analysts, which is one because there's only 4 of us. so I mentor all of our entire junior team. um, so I lead
And
a team of 2.
what would you
One is
say? What would you say percent wise you spend in each one of the, like what is the primary day to day that you do? Like would it be the engineering side? Would it be the data science side? Is it the client facing side or the management side of your team of one?
Yeah, so it's and the team of 1 actually doesn't even technically report to me, so I just help them with the technical stuff. So I know I'm talking myself down a little bit here, but I would say between the data engineering and the data science is probably the bigger chunk, but it really depends on what phase of the project something is. Typically, if we engage a client, we get hired to do something. The first thing we have to do is talk to the client and get requirements, kind of a lot more customer facing stuff to figure out what are the requirements, what data do we need, looking at the data saying this isn't exactly what we need, or hey, you gave us this data, but this looks wrong, whatever, and going back and forth with the client on some of that. Then, of course, we need to do kind of data engineering, which is now we have the data, but we need to put it into a data warehouse of some kind. Um, and that has to happen before the data science happens. And so I guess day to day, it's not like, okay, I'm going to spend 3 hours doing data engineering, then 5 hours doing data science or whatever. It ends up being, for a few weeks, pretty much all I'm doing is kind of data cleaning, data aggregation, data engineering stuff in Redshift for multiple weeks in a row. And then I'm creating models and using that data pretty much exclusively for several weeks. My role interacting with clients is pretty minimal. There's a couple other people on our team. Half the team focuses on that a little bit more. And so, but I am interacting with them, particularly on kind of the technical aspects of the projects that I'm working on, because I'm obviously most familiar with the details of those.
And what
And then,
what kind of projects would these be? I mean, when you're dealing with data science, it's could be used in any field whatsoever. I feel like, but when a client comes to you, or when you find a client, what does a typical project look like?
so we focus on things that touch and are related to the customer. So that's kind of our forte, our specialty. So what does that mean? So that could mean subscription-based clients. We're going to try and predict which customers are likely to churn or not renew their service, or not pay. It might mean let's figure out who's not going to pay, so we know, kind of can inform collection efforts. Who do they need to call to get to pay? If somebody's late on their payment and they're going to pay anyway, they're just going to pay late. You don't want to really waste resources on that. But if somebody's really not going to pay unless you call them, you want to make sure that you do. So anything from that, we do next best product recommendations. So something like, we have this
Would that
client,
be
we want to talk to them. what should we recommend that they buy next, or what should we try to sell them next?
Would that be kind of like the Amazon, customers who liked this also liked, whatever product it might be?
Yeah, it can be. It definitely can be. It kind of varies. So it can be like a collaborative filtering approach, recommender system type thing. But sometimes it can be even simpler than that. A lot of companies don't have a ton of products. So if you think of like a typical, say, internet service provider or something like that, or maybe a Verizon wireless, right? So they have a phone. What is the next best product that you recommend? There's only so many things you can recommend, right? If they bought a phone in the last 6 months, you're probably not going to recommend they buy a newer phone because they're unlikely to, unless there's somebody that happens to buy phones a lot. But if I bought a phone last month, then my options for what to give them are limited, and you almost end up with a very similar to a rules-based approach if you only have 3 or 5 products.
Yeah.
Or if it's communications, right, where they sell TV, internet, or voice, phone. Well, then it's like, well, if they have internet, you're probably not going to recommend internet.
Yeah.
So now you're left 2 other options. And so sometimes it can be a recommender system, which is really nice. Sometimes it's just a simple kind of rule-based thing where you're really kind of automating stuff more than real in-depth analysis.
When you have the customer meetings for whatever the customer may be wanting, and you are actually doing the client-facing role, what is your conversation? Like, who are you speaking with typically? Is it going to be executive level? Is it going to be management level? Is it going to be technical level? Is it going to be, like, who are you typically speaking with?
Yeah, so I'll be in calls with all of the above. However, the ones that I'll typically be speaking up to the most is going to be at the technical level. Normally, right, I'm not the client engagement lead. It's kind of the buzzword for it, which kind of is the engagement lead is going to be the primary person dedicated to that account that's going to be kind of communicating with them.
Be like an account manager or something?
Exactly, like the account manager. And so if we're talking to executive leadership, they're gonna be able to speak to the stuff that those people are interested in more. I don't read that. I don't necessarily know all the details about the contract or the pricing or
where does your interest level lie on that?
I much prefer the technical stuff. I don't mind. I like kind of hearing and knowing what's going on at those different levels because I think it helps me do my job. But I would rather stick to actually working and discussing the technical pieces.
Okay, I can relate to that. On the projects that you're working on, your lead, you have your junior analyst below you. What you deal with your engineering, your data engineering, then you start running your models, then you have your output. When it comes to the final product, how is like the development of the model and everything, how is that packaged towards the end as a final output?
Yeah, so we're there's a lot of ways that other people do it, but the way we tend to do it is we're typically providing the insight, and the customer is kind of responsible for doing something with it in their system. So not all the time. We have ones where we do the deploying as well, but a lot of times they're going to give us a file, maybe daily or weekly or monthly with the data, but on some frequency they're going to pass us the data. We're going to process it, score it, run it through our models, and then pass a file back to them. And they may load that into their system, and they might expose it into like a dynamic CRM or Salesforce or any CRM thing or whatever system they have. We would give them the scores for. There's exceptions, of course, but a lot of times that's kind of what we're doing.
Okay. And then I think my favorite question for this whole interview will probably be, explain to me how you got to your current position, Isaac.
Yeah, it's a long story. So I guess I'll tell you the full
Start
thing.
if you don't mind. Start with going from high school into college. Like, what did you major in? What were you kind of? Did you have any goals at that point? Like, start back that far. I know the more recent history is more entertaining, but if you don't mind,
yeah. So I graduated from high school barely. Finished my graduation requirements the Friday before graduation, and so I was one of the last in line at the graduation ceremony because I didn't get put in alphabetical order because I wasn't on the graduation list in time for the rehearsal, so I didn't do that well at school.
So it went from Ziegler to Flath.
Yeah, there was like four of us right at the end. So decided I didn't need college at the time. Later learned better, but at the time I didn't need college. So I decided I would go to work, and I went to work doing medical assembly in a manufacturing line. I was at Boston Scientific for a bit. When I was at Boston Scientific, I was, machine operator. Then I moved to, I guess when I was at Boston Scientific, I met a guy named Von Jeanette who mentored me a lot of ways, helped me a lot throughout it. And from Boston Scientific, he ended up leaving and going to EV3, which was later bought by Covidien, which was later bought by Medtronic, but it was EV3 at the time, between the EV3 and Covidien transition. And so, we were there for a while, and then we ended up going to a telecommunications manufacturing at Clearfield, and kind of, I worked under him, and he taught me quite a bit as I went. And so, Boston Scientific, I was a machine operator. At EV3, I was a machine, assembly line worker, and then I was a lead manufacturing associate. So kind of
working your way up.
Not a supervisor, but he was a supervisor. I was the lead underneath, and then we went to, the telecommunications. And
it sounds like you were kind of following him. Was this like an agreed upon thing? Like he'd find a new position and be like, "Come join me." What was the dynamic on that?
No. I mean, we talked. We actually never really like hung out a ton. We did some, but we always kept in touch. And it was kind of, he would find a new company, and I'd be like, "Yeah, the company I'm at sucks," and so I'd go there.
Okay.
And we just really enjoyed working together, so it just kind of worked out. I was kind of able to advance a little bit, but and there's a lot of ways you can do this, but I was kind of always drawn to the things, right? So yeah. One of the reasons I was able to get the lead position at EV3 is when I talked to the manager, he was asking me questions about lean manufacturing and how best to set up and optimize an assembly line. And I answered those questions well about, how would you optimize it to make sure your throughput's good and balance the different positions. So even then I was kind of interested more in the analytical side than anything. And then when I went to the telecommunications company, Clearfield, I took a step back into the assembly line, but then I moved and I did, I forget what it was called, but it was essentially a documentation position, which I don't know if you could have pictured me doing documentation.
I can't imagine you being too enthused about that. I could picture you trying to write or trying to automate it somehow so that you just didn't have to show up.
Yeah, so it was a documentation, kind of more, I guess, more a data entry position, I suppose. Okay. Kind of a hybrid between that. And I did that for a bit, and then I was the RMA for customer returns coordinator. And
what is that? Something merchandise? Retail merchandise?
Return merchandise authorization. Okay. So I would process the
right, like RMA forms.
Exactly.
Okay, got it,
So I
got it. Yeah.
process that. I process the stuff in the warehouse. I look at it, determine if it's damaged or not, and I do all that process. And I was making processes for everything because I'm like, this is what I do, and I
Yeah.
write it down, and I make a clear process. And I started working with dynamic CRM, and I started kind of, much to IT's dismay, kind of building stuff myself inside a CRM and automating as much as I could.
How did you pick that up? Was it just out of like you'd work in your off hours and you'd pick it up, or how did you figure out how to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
mostly out of necessity, right? When I need something, I try and figure out how it can be done.
And would you just Google it? Did you read about it? Did you just tinker it till you broke it and then fix it?
Well, I took some CRM courses, developer courses on Pluralsight.
Okay.
Was kind of how I got it. And that gave me an idea of what the functionality was and what are all the kind of things that could be done. And then from there, it was all about Googling it and trial and error. And so after that, after I was RMA coordinator, they liked what I did so much, I became a business process engineer. So my whole job was to go around all the different
business processes.
That's right. And so I'd make processes, I'd streamline things, I'd make things easy. Making the processes, I found that to be interesting. I found trying to execute and get people to follow the processes to be much less interesting. And so, again, it was kind of the analytical side. After that, I became an associate product manager.
Okay.
And again, that was because
this is still at was it a telecom company? Where are you now?
Yeah, telecom manufacturing.
Okay.
Telecom company. They sold telecom equipment.
Okay.
Cabinets, fiber optic cables, things like that. And so I became an associate product manager, mostly just because I was really good at Excel by that time because I'd been using it for everything. And yeah, so I did that. And then eventually I moved on to, I'm sure I'm going to forget some places along the way. I was changing jobs like every 6 or 8 months at the time. I'm way beyond that now.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, and then all those jobs. So I had kind of lots of promotions very quickly, but oftentimes within the same company, like with the telecom one. And then I went to a company called Biomedics. They did some medical. They sell a arterial testing device. Essentially,
this is the company you worked for when we met, right?
Probably, maybe. No, when we met, I was a dance teacher.
No.
Right?
You were an analyst for a blood cuff. There was a blood cuff.
Them.
Okay. Continue. Yeah. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, it's basically a blood cuff. So it measures blood flow and checks arterial disease. And I got a job there as a network analyst. So the two main skills they were looking for is kind of analysis stuff, but then also dynamic CRM to be able to, they were using that for operations. And so I would modify and create views and customize the dynamic CRM stuff and then pull data. And so it was really more kind of a CRM customization, data analysis position. Okay. After a while, I decided I wanted to go be a dance teacher, so I did that for a year and a half. And didn't have any dance.
Go ahead.
Didn't know how to dance at the time.
But, so you became a dance instructor without any dance experience?
That's right.
Fantastic. Okay.
That's right. So
what kind of dance? What kind of dance was that?
Ballroom and Latin dance. So
why?
Any kind of partner dancing.
Why did you, without dance experience, why did you decide to become a dance teacher?
Yeah, so I guess I'd had some part-time jobs teaching tennis and swimming to adults. And I was actually looking to do that, be like kind of a tennis instructor full-time. So I'd applied at like a Lifetime and a couple other places. And then my older brother was like, hey, Cinema Ballroom close to you is hiring dance teachers. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to dance. It says, it says if you got the right teaching background, you don't need it. And I was like, what the hell, I'll apply. And so I applied, and then I was kind of surprised they wanted to interview me, and then they interviewed me, and then I got the job, which was kind of amazing because like they didn't have me do anything dance related. We just talked in an office. I had kind of expected like to come in and then be like, "Do you have any dance experience?" No, and I kind of expected them to try and teach me a couple of dance steps.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would have expected. Like at least gone through like a very simple dance routine and see how quick you take it up, and then if you can kind of translate it back or something. But
no, we just talked in an office for like 10 or 15 minutes, mostly about how important college education is.
Which you didn't have at the time.
I didn't have. So and I got the job. After a year, I got promoted there from associate dance instructor to staff dance instructor, and but ultimately, I didn't. There's a lot of good things about teaching dance. There's a lot of bad. I met my girlfriend Alyssa while I was teaching dance, and she still works there. So I won't say too much about the studio.
I do have to ask: is she teaching again?
She is some. Yeah.
Okay, so even with all the shutdown, there's still some need.
There is some, but there's not a lot of people taking lessons right now, as you could imagine.
Yeah.
Not nearly as there was before, and so it's tough. But she's teaching some.
Okay.
So I moved on. This whole time I was still working at that blood cuffs place part time. Went back there, kind of did some call center stuff with them, and then did some accounting stuff with them briefly.
Can you comment, Colin? Can you comment on the accounting? So why you got into accounting and what that was like?
Well, why I got into accounting, I guess it's the same with that. Like I saw an opportunity and it was slightly better than where I was at, what I was doing before, and so I went for it. Okay. I guess I'm a strong believer in. I think a lot of people suffer from the mistake of looking for exactly what they want to do, which I guess you should look for exactly what you want to do. But if you see something that's like a half step closer in that direction, it's like, take it. Why not?
Yeah, I like that. That's an interesting comment. I think I'm guilty of that.
I think Obama said, "Never let perfect get in the way of better."
I like that.
It's a good quote. And so so it was it was a little bit better, and then ultimately then I moved to went to a company called Seven Medical Systems, and doing kind of again more technical stuff. So as I'm doing it, it's getting closer and closer to something technical. And there I was a dynamic CRM developer, and I also did a lot of Power BI development stuff. At the time,
both of those on the kind of the I'll say the low end, require a lot of Java. Is that correct?
Well, so what I was doing, I guess, a lot of developers, and I guess I tend to agree with them now, wouldn't necessarily call what I was doing development. They'd consider it more customization. Okay. So I was working within the user interface of Dynamics CRM and Power BI to create new dashboards and new things. And so I wasn't doing a whole lot of coding at that point.
Okay.
It was very minimal JavaScript that I used, but not a ton.
Okay, and where did you pick up the JavaScript that you did use? Where did you pick that up? Had you done it previously, or did you pick it up on the fly?
I picked it up on the fly.
Okay, just Google.
Took some courses, Googled it, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Again, I took a little bit of Pluralsight. And I guess at that around that time, I think I took some data science courses on Coursera, and I really enjoyed them, and decided I wanted to do that. And so, then then I worked at a company called Link Up, and that was kind of doing more kind of data analysis, data science stuff. Kind of a hybrid. It was a small company. That's why.
So how was the leap going from some Power BI and CRM, customization to full on, level data science stuff? You went all of a sudden from that one role to another, which seems, both on a technical side, but seems like a particularly significant gap. Like, how were your first few weeks there? Were they, thrown in the deep end and just start swimming? What was that like?
Yeah, so I'd been doing some of the stuff for personal projects, but it's just not really the same, when you're doing it for work. And thankfully, well, I guess it's good or bad. When I went to Link Up, they were hiring me because they didn't have any data analyst or any data scientist or anybody that knew anything about what to do with data. And
as far as they knew, you were an expert.
Right.
There you go. Okay.
And so my goal was to become an expert before anybody figured it out.
This seems like a pattern. This is a pattern that I'm noticing. You're a dance instructor with no dance experience. So you're just a professional con man. This is what I'm getting.
Well, it's only a con if I don't provide them value.
Okay, so you're
these employers.
So you go in as a con, but you end with some added value.
I would say I go in telling them that I can do the job, and I get the job, and then I figure out how to do it, and I do the job, and so the job is done. I didn't con them.
Okay. So you've gotten your first job as what could be deemed data science, essentially.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've done components of it here and there and other jobs and personal projects. But yeah, that was kind of the closest. That was kind of the first real big step into it. I think understanding data structures, understanding how to think is really important, and that kind of and really knowing how to learn and being willing to put the time in was key. So I worked there for a bit. I guess I left there, and then I'm at Centriam, and I really like it at Centrium. So
okay, and in this whole process, I know your family has kind of a unique. Everyone in your family seems to have a fairly unique profession, but was there anyone in particular that kind of led to your desire to become a data scientist, or was it, or led to your desire to be more on the technical side? Was that just a natural thing for you, or was it your dad's, being an instructor? Was it your, some other family member or friend that you passed that kind of brought you in this direction, or your own, your own teacher?
I think I kind of, like, when I was out of high school, I thought I really wanted to do like business managerial stuff. That's kind of what led me towards product management. But I was really pressing for a while on the business route. But over time, like every position that I got, I found that the pieces that I enjoyed about the position, early on were the Excel analysis, and then it was the Power BI stuff, and then it was the CRM development, and then it was making, and then all the stuff that I didn't like was the project management pieces, the coordinating with people, the kind of all that stuff was the stuff I didn't like. And so I think I worked a lot of jobs, and I kept finding that the stuff that I enjoyed about them was the technical pieces, and the stuff that I didn't enjoy was the rest.
Okay.
And so I just kind of got there slowly, I guess.
Okay. So you took the opportunities that not only gave you some sort of bump up, but also something that just interested you more. Anything that interested you more, you followed that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
And if I have an interest in something, then then I build that skill. And when I build that skill, that naturally leads to more opportunities in that area. So
during that whole event, you were not the best student starting out, as you mentioned. Now you appear to be very good at learning. You know, I won't say you're the best student because that's a different statement. But you are a very good learner. What did you struggle? What changed first off, and then also was there anything that you really struggled with along the way, whether it be with just the student aspect or whether it be with a particular subject?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Yeah, so now I got a bachelor's degree, working on a master's, and I guess it's and I think knowing how to learn quickly is the most important skill. And I wouldn't say, I guess, that anything particularly changed with me. I think I'm in better control of what I can learn, right? So like in high school, and the problem is like I don't see how any of this stuff applies or will be helpful to me, right? Like, and so I didn't have any interest in it. I've learned that I'm pretty practical. I guess my interests are very practical. If something is kind of theoretical, or I don't see how I could ever use it, I have basically no interest in it. And that's different. Like, my a lot of my siblings, like my oldest brother, my dad, one of my other brothers, they like messing around with programming languages or learning concepts that don't really have any use in the real world. They just kind of find these concepts interesting inherently. And I kind of don't. I don't usually find things, I mean, I might find things interesting, concepts that aren't practical, but I'm probably not going to be able to force myself to spend a lot of time delving into something that I'm never going to use to solve an actual problem. And so I think a lot of what you learn in high school and college is not actually very practical.
Yeah.
Both from what they teach as well as how they teach it. And so it's been and is a struggle for me to have the discipline to do that stuff, knowing that, like, hey, I'm going to learn this and never use it. And some people have this theoretical streak where they can find things interesting and spend a lot of time studying things that'll never have practical value or foreseeable practical value, and that's just not me.
Okay. Was there any subjects that you struggled with? Like, I think you're delving pretty heavily into the calculus side of things. Was that a course that you struggled with in your undergrad, or was there anything else that you might have struggled with other than the theory side of things? Like that.
Well, I think
let me rephrase that. Is there anything that you currently use today that you struggle to learn, like, significantly?
Yeah, I mean, when I first went through linear algebra and calculus, and even English class, I mean, like, obviously everyone writes a lot. You write reports. I guess I struggled with them all. I guess to me, I see how difficult something is to learn kind of as a function of time, right? Like, is calculus hard to learn? I don't know. Takes me longer to learn than it would arithmetic, right? Like,
yeah.
So, like, I don't really necessarily think of things as, this is really hard or this is a struggle. It's, am I willing to put in the time or not?
Yeah.
And at the time, I was not willing to put in the time, because you think about your normal calculus course in college, they're going to teach you things like limits, which are completely worthless and meaningless. Like, yeah, okay, we're going to find the point in which the graph is undefined. Okay, the one point in the graph that that is not useful, we're going to find it. But I mean, ultimately, derivatives are kind of limits, but it's one of these things that the way it's taught, the way limits are taught, don't lead to practical value, and they don't connect it to a practical problem.
I found
they don't say, hey, we're going to learn about derivatives. Derivatives measure the rate of change. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this data set of coronavirus cases, and we're going to calculate the polynomial best fit, and then we're going to calculate a sigmoid of best fit, whatever. We're going to calculate some best fit function, and then we're going to calculate the derivative and show that we can see how fast or slow coronavirus is spreading at any given point in time using that derivative. If they had taught it that way, I'd be like, oh, I can see why that's super useful.
Well, I remember in calculus, I struggled with all things math, and I love all things math now. And, physics I struggle with, and it's my favorite course I can imagine. But I remember I was actually staying at a friend's house. He had just had a baby, and I was helping out on the weekends. And I was doing some of my homework. I forget exactly what it was. But I was just doing, I'm pretty sure it was limits. I don't even think we had gotten to the derivative side of it. I was just doing limits. And I felt like an absolute idiot because my buddy, I'm doing it and I'm kind of struggling with kind of figuring out what's going on. And he just looked at me and goes, yeah, you're just calculating the slope. And no one had ever, I hadn't bothered to look into it, but no one had bothered to explain to me the formula for limits is just a complicated way of y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. It's just the slope formula. That's all it is. And I think I was halfway through the course at the time. And I'm like, why did no one ever tell me that? I mean, I looking back, it's very obvious when you look at it. Once you understand it, you're like, oh yeah, of course it is. But at the time when you're just getting exposed to it, you look at it, you don't understand what it is. And had anyone just said it's just the slope of something, it would have clicked, And I agree completely. It's I think the way they teach it is terrible. It's absolutely terrible.
Yeah, well, I think they have these really useful practical concepts, but they teach them as if they're these theoretical things.
Well, they just say, remember the formula. Remember this formula.
That too. But I mean, the number of people that are interested in either straight memorization or interested in theoretical pure math, kind of your math for the sake of math, is much smaller than the number of people that I think are interested in how do I actually use this to solve a problem. And I think pure math is, it's something that, someone needs to do, and it pushes us forward. But I think the number of people that enjoy pure math is a lot less than the number of people that can enjoy using math to solve a problem.
There's a quote from the
focus on the first.
Do you know who Richard Feynman is, the Nobel Prize? Yeah, okay. There's a quote from him, something in regards to the line that mathematics is masturbation, whereas physics is sex. That it was like something aligning those two, and it was the whole point. It's like, masturbation you can do for fun, but there's no point to it. Whereas sex, you get the fun out of it, and there's actually an application for it.
Yeah.
that was his argument for it, which I always got a kick out of. Okay, you have your one junior analyst now. That you're kind of mentoring along. In that, do you notice that there's anything in particular that he or she actually struggles with? So you had yours, which has turned into, if I may just kind of summarize, it turns into any struggle is really just a factor of how much time you're willing to spend on it, and some things will require more time than others. But is there kind of a consistent road bump or speed bump in the way when they're learning?
Yeah, I mean, I've only started really working with him, mentoring him, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I can't, speak a ton to him because, he's developing. But in general, I've worked with a lot of people that have kind of gone through this process, and I think the the most challenging thing is to get people to think in reverse order. And what I mean by that is you can think of things in two ways. You can think of things start to finish. Like, first I need to download my data, then I need to load my data, then I need to process it, do these transformations, then I need to build my model. But a lot of times it's really helpful to work kind of the other way and say, okay, cool, I want to build a machine learning model. To do that, I need normalized data. To do that, I need to load it from. I need to load it in a data frame. To do that, I probably need my data there. And so, kind of this working in reverse is helpful for a lot of reasons, particularly when it comes to troubleshooting code and issues, because a lot of times, right, you run your code, you run whatever, it breaks, and you get the line where it actually broke. And if you say, cool, this is where it broke, let me start from the start and work my way through to find where it's wrong, it's going to take forever. It's better to say, I'm going to start from where it broke and then branch and work backwards slowly until I find the last place that was working. And then I can see exactly where it broke. And, I think I think anybody can learn the code. I think anybody can learn the math. I think it's kind of learning how to think through these problems. And again, I think it's starting from the end and working backwards is really important, because it allows you to see what is actually needed to solve this problem. If you get a problem and you start thinking about everything that would be helpful to do along the way, you're going to have a lot of stuff that didn't actually need to happen, or you're going to have a lot of thoughts and think about things and go down a lot of avenues that didn't actually need to happen. I think if you start with the goal in mind and work backwards, it's more of, okay, what do I need in order to do this? What needs to happen? And I take that one step back. I think, at least for me, that helps me break problems into small enough pieces that I can tackle.
Do you think, like, conceptually that might be because if you start at the starting point has the potential to branch in like an infinite number of directions, whereas if you start at your end point, you're going down only one branch. Like, in order to go backwards, you're only following a singular line. Is that kind of like a good concept as to what you're thinking about?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think one, it's that, and picking which branch is hard. The more complicated the problem is. So, if you've got a simple problem, it doesn't really matter how you think about it, because you can just think through it real quick. If you have a project and it's going to take you a month to complete, and you think about, okay, this is where I start and this is where I end, and now from my number one starting point, I'm going to think through step by step everything that needs to happen. You're so disconnected from what your goal is. You're 1,000 steps between the starting point and your ending point. You might have 1,000 steps in the middle, and figuring out what you need to do at the beginning is really hard because you're 1,000 steps away from the end.
Yeah.
It's much easier, in my opinion. You start at the end, and every decision you make, the first decision you make of what needs to happen, you're only one step away from your goal.
Yeah.
And then you make another decision. Well, now it's 2 steps away from the goal, but you've already thought through all that stuff.
Yeah.
And working backwards, I think, helps you figure out exactly what you need and which path is the right path to take.
Okay. So kind of going in a different direction, I think the normal life of everybody is you wake up in the morning and you're hitting snooze on your alarm clock. So the ongoing question is, what gets you up in the morning? So, like, in the sense of data science in particular, what keeps you excited about it?
Well, I'm really excited because things each data set is very different, and what needs to happen to do well is very different, and so the you're kind of always have kind of your base set of tools, but you're always having to modify or tweak them a little bit to get things to work. So, for example, one of the problems I'm working on right now is I've got 70,000 things so I need to classify, and 200 of them are positive.
Okay.
And the rest are negative. And so I have this massive imbalanced class problem, and now I'm not going to say, well, decision tree ensembles and deep neural networks are no good because of this. I'm still going to use those techniques because they tend to work the best. But now I need to tweak it a little bit to take into account, because I can be almost perfect if I just say they're all negative.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I only misclassified, a couple hundred out of 70,000. Like, that's great. However, also useless. And so so that's another tangent, but as that, just because you're getting a good score in your metric doesn't mean you're making something actually useful.
There was, I need to comment. I had to take a machine learning class. I actually forget the title. I want to say it was machine learning was the title, in my graduate program. And the example on like the first or second day of class was, okay, a mammogram is, let's say, 70% accurate. So if you test positive for breast cancer during a mammogram, what's the likelihood that you have cancer? And so you went through this whole spiel, and then he goes, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, you're also male. And so it was basically introducing the fact that just because your model has this set of accuracy, you also have to take into account what's the likelihood that you would have it, even regardless of what the test said, what's the likelihood that you actually have it to begin with. And if you're a man, it's incredibly low. So you take that into account before you take into account the results of the actual model, and then and I always got a kick out of that. Because I think the math wound up being like you only have like a 3% chance of actually having breast cancer, and it was, everyone had guessed you're 70% likely to have it.
Yeah, and it's that's another example. Another example is that if I want to predict say predicting the next day's stock price would be hugely important, right? So at 6 p.m., if I can predict what the stock price is going to be when the stock market opens the next day, within 15 minutes after it opens, the first 15 minutes, that could be really valuable. However, really the thing you can do at 6 p.m. is look at what the closing price was and predict that, and you'll be pretty close.
Yeah.
Your metric's going to show that you are, among top tier in terms of a
predictive
typical
qualities.
But at the same time, it's kind of information theory is like, just because what you want your model to add information, and just predicting that forward might mean you're really close. Doesn't mean it adds any kind of information.
Yeah. Basically you're saying that just the fact that you're dealing with consistent logical challenges throughout this. Like it's almost a puzzle. Every day is a puzzle.
Yeah, and it's moving, it's changing enough. To me, if you look at data engineering, in most cases, at the cutting edge, everything's interesting. But in most cases, you're trying to build, you're going to ingest some data, some structured data. You're going to put it into a SQL database. You're going to have multiple layers of transformations. You're going to create views. There's a lot of like best practices that you're almost always going to follow. That's a lot less interesting to me than kind of some of the nuanced stuff.
So that seems more like a repetitive, recipe.
Yeah. And I'm not an expert on data engineering, so I'm probably, if you talk to an expert on data engineering, they'll be like, he's totally oversimplifying everything that we do. And that's true, but I find the data science way more interesting.
Okay. Outside of that, are you still? So I'll move on to the next question of just basically what pastimes you're participating in. I remember you were dancing competitively for some time. I think you got into swimming for a while, and then last I remember you were rock climbing. Where are you at now?
Yeah, yeah. Now I'm mostly sitting on my butt doing close to nothing.
Blogging. You have your
Actually,
blog. You have your blog.
I do blog. Actually, sitting on the floor in front of my couch. Uh,
Oh,
I
perfect.
guess I could have sat on the couch, but
I'm sitting on a pillow on a box right now.
okay. Yeah, no, I've been doing. I've been blogging, so that's probably my biggest hobby right now, about data science and machine learning. So I try to post, one or two blog posts a week on something that interests me, or somebody asks me about.
What's been the most interesting post you think you have? What's been your favorite?
Well, I think the most interesting one is, I kind of went back and built a really basic kind of one-layer neural network to classify minced, which is your handwritten
Yeah,
digits,
yeah,
from scratch, just from arrays, essentially. So kind of without using one of these deep learning frameworks that does it, defining the matrix multiplication and your ReLUs and and all that, your loss functions, your backwards passes, kind of defining all of that myself. I thought that was kind of interesting. It was a lot of high level concepts and things that I understood pretty well, but you always get a little bit deeper understanding when you actually put it to code.
Okay. And then my last question for today is probably my favorite. You have kind of an odd path that you've taken. If you were to start all over, is there any particular path you think you would have gone down, or would it have repeated in some other similar fashion? Would you have gone, like, for an example, do you think you would have gone for medical doctor? Do you think you would have gone for statistician? Do you think you would have gone for full-time, competitive dancer? What do you think if you could do it all over again, what do you think you would have told your, 15, 16-year-old self?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would have, probably gone into the data science stuff sooner. I think I'd kind of, everyone lies to themselves about something or other, right? Like, we've had this discussion before, but everyone has something they lie to themselves about. And at the time, I think I had convinced myself that what I really wanted to do was manage people and kind of be a business person. And I had kind of illusions of grandeur of managing lots of people. And I think because I'd convinced myself so strongly that that's what I wanted to do, that I stuck with it for longer than I really should have.
Okay.
There's so many positions where I was really trying to do that didn't. I mean, they went well. I've always gotten really strong positive feedback.
You learned from those. It wasn't. I don't think that was a waste of time. It didn't seem like it, at least.
No, and I think a good chunk of the value and the reason I'm able to find these new jobs is because I am now kind of a technical resource that understands the machine learning stuff reasonably well, better than most at least. Not as good as others, but better than most. But I also, have seen enough things that I can. I guess I can function in a lot of different roles. I can kind of be thrown into a call with customers without notice and be fine. I can, be given some data and been like, we don't know what to do with it, figure it out, and I'll be fine. We can kind of be thrown on a project and be like, hey, you got to take lead on this, and I'll be okay. I can manage that. You can tell me, hey, we need a database, and I'll figure out how to set it up. And so, I think it's given me that ability to kind of I don't know, solve a lot of things. And I think now I'm kind of realizing that what I really enjoy is a little bit of a narrower focus. So over time, my focus is getting much narrower.
Do you think you would have gone to school sooner? Like right after high school, do you think? I mean, had you known out of the gate that you would have wanted to do data science, do you think you would have gone and got a bachelor's in, some degree having to focus on that, or do you think you would have gone to work first and tried to go with that route?
I mean, I think that I think I probably would have gone to school. I'm kind of glad I didn't do school immediately. Personally, I think that in terms of a credential, the schooling is important. In terms of if you have 4 years, and you ask me what is the most effective way to learn a topic, I'm not going to tell you the most effective way to learn and actually pick up a skill on a topic that's useful is getting a bachelor's degree.
I can agree
and
with
I think
that.
pretty much everyone would kind of agree with that. Like, hey, I've got 4 years to learn how to program. What should I do? Go back to school for a bachelor's? Like come on.
Yeah, you'd say go do a bunch of Kaggle competitions or something.
That's right. And now, the advantage to, I don't know. I mean, I think there's better ways to learn. I think,
but
people when they're 18 to 22, I think it gives you that. It gives you structure needed to continue learning, right? I think most people when they're 18, myself included, I went to work in the assembly line. Most people when they're 18 to 22, and they they're kind of like, hey, you can do anything you want. You don't have any school. Nobody's going to tell you to work on a course. Nobody's going to do this. I mean, how many of them do you think are going to be like, cool, I'm going to put my head down and study?
Not me.
I mean, I think it's when you have a course.
Yeah, I was in a similar. I started school at 18 and I left school at 18, and then didn't return until I think 21, 22, something like that. But I definitely did not put my head down and study. Would you have any advice for anyone seeking a data science role? I know it's a very hot topic right now, and you went a very indirect route to get there. But do you think there's like what, as far as data science, what would be a focal point for for your personal education? If you're trying to get a data science role, what should you focus on? Should it be a particular language? Should it be the concepts behind it? Should it be, what would it be?
So I think there's two things that are really, really important. One is to get a really high-level overview about how the entire tech stack works.
What do you mean by that?
If you're looking for a job. So, for example, how does a website communicate with a server? How does a database? How would you set up a database and do this? I don't think you need to know how to do everything, but I think you need to generally have an idea of how databases, servers, different things kind of communicate with each other, because whatever your role, you're going to be trying to get data that's generated by these systems. And if they're all big black boxes with no idea how to approach them, then you kind of run into some roadblocks. So there's Udemy courses that you can take that are like $20 that go through the AWS infrastructure, and AWS has like everything. And so if you get a summary of what all AWS's services are, that kind of gives you an idea how everything might work. Again, I don't think you need to go through the class in detail. I don't think you need to actually get the certificates unless you want to. And I don't think you need to kind of do every lab and do everything, but have a general high-level idea how all that might fit together, I think is helpful.
Okay.
So, for example, I took one of those courses, and I watched all the lectures at time and a half speed, and didn't do any of the projects. And that was what I got out of it, and I thought it was super useful. Because now if it's like, hey, how would you do this? I'm like, oh, well, I know AWS Glue does something like that. I've never used it, but I know I'm familiar with that. Or Kinesis. any project, any problem to solve, I at least kind of know where to start.
Okay.
Rather than being like, I'll do a Google search and everyone will give me conflicting information. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then the second thing is, I think you just kind of pick which. I mean, you're not going to learn everything in data science. So you got to find the piece that interests you, and focus on that. If you're doing machine learning type stuff, Fast AI has phenomenal courses to get started with. I took them to get started, and I'm still going through the material again and again. I use that library a lot. Or there's other machine learning courses. I know deeplearning.ai has one that's more focused on kind of math notation, as well as application, taught in a little different way. Maybe your focus is solution architecting, and so you just want to learn more about the AWS and how to actually set up that stuff. Or maybe your focus is working with really big data sets, in which case, you will need to learn how to stream data. Like, for example, I'm not super comfortable streaming data where I can't, either fit it into memory or you don't have images that load it. And so maybe you want to, really focus more on the infrastructure side, or really focus on how do I get real-time predictions or models that are updating in real time. And so I think you just pick an area that you like and, focus on that. I've kind of chosen the machine learning area as what's interesting to me, but I think you need a general high-level understanding of everything, and then find your focus and just dig in and learn what you need to as you go.
Well, thank you, Isaac.